Japanese Grand Prix was filled with intense drama, and for the first time in a long while, it had nothing to do with Max Verstappen or Red Bull. At Suzuka, the Silverstone-based team Mercedes found themselves in a tight spot when their two drivers decided to compete with each other rather than other rival teams. When the battle intensified, the team was forced to make a tough decision that the drivers, especially Russell, were not pleased with. So, what happened at Suzuka, and how did the drivers react? At the Japanese Grand Prix that was held last week, Mercedes faced a major headache on how to resolve the battle between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton during the race. The two drivers had encountered each other on track quite early during the race. Russell had started the battle by overtaking his teammate through the chicane, and once the opportunity arose, Hamilton gladly took back his position. Along the line, the two drivers found themselves racing side by side. If their cars didn't have the same design, the audience would have thought they were from different teams based on their aggressiveness. However, Hamilton had ended up victorious by pushing Russell wide onto the escape area. Russell had gotten so mad that he got on the radio to question whether they were battling each other or their rivals. Knowing things could get worse if they kept encountering each other, the team decided to split strategies for both drivers. This means one driver would get the one-stop strategy, and the other driver would get the two-stop strategy. So, on lap 16, Hamilton was called into the pits to take on the hard tyre, but left Russell to keep driving on his tyres. Of course, this easily separated the drivers on the track, and Mercedes thought they wouldn't worry about the drivers encountering each other again. Well, that didn't happen. In the closing stages of the race, Hamilton soon caught up with Russell after pitting again on lap 34. His new tyres had made it easy to meet up. However, he found himself stuck behind his teammate alongside Carlos Sainz. Russell, who was in 5th place, was willing to do his best to hold on to the position with his almost worn-out tyres. But he was left with no choice but to let Hamilton through because the instructions had come from above. Initially, Russell thought the best thing to do was to use the tactic Carlos Sainz used at the Singapore GP, which was to work together with Hamilton by keeping him in his DRS, rather than letting him through, so that both of them would stay ahead of Carlos Sainz. But when the instructions came, it clearly stated that he let Hamilton through and prevent Sainz from getting ahead. However, Russell also demanded that Hamilton slow down to give him DRS to aid his defense against the Ferrari. Sadly, it didn't work, and he ended up also losing his position to Sainz. If one could see Russell's face at the time, it was probably red with anger, because on the radio, he yells with frustration, questioning why he had to sacrifice his position for Hamilton. However, after the race, he explained that he couldn't help but let out his frustration after he lost his position. When you're in the car, and 48 laps in, you're giving it everything, and you're making a suboptimal strategy to try and work. That radio is a vent to release some frustration. Although the strategy had worked in keeping Hamilton ahead, why was Russell not allowed to stay in front, and maybe they'd have ended with a 5-6 win instead? One answer: Toto Wolff. The team's principal had been absent from the race as he was recuperating from the knee injury he had a while back. But being the CEO and team boss, he still had to make the critical decision. So, he decided it was better to sacrifice the weaker driver, which in this case was Russell, due to him being on weaker tyres, than letting the Ferrari get past both of them. As regards the decision to split the drivers' strategies, the trackside engineer Andrew Schlovlin explained what they had done better. He said it wasn't really to separate the drivers, but to optimise their performance to ensure they remained ahead of Ferrari on the constructors' table. When we were looking at it earlier in the race, we were projecting some better upside that we could maybe do quite well if the others weren't able to overtake later on. At the point we were deciding to do it, it was actually looking like, do we try and get to the end where we have a chase of being ahead of Sainz? Or do we stop, we drop behind Alonso, get through with new tyres, and you're behind Sainz anyway? But it was a difficult strategy to pull off, and Russell did well to manage it. The one-stop strategy had not been Russell's problem, it was the fact that the team had instructed Hamilton to get ahead of him and cause him to fall behind Carlos Sainz, who he had been fighting off for a major part of the race. Former Mercedes reserve driver Sam Bird shared his bit about the tension between the two drivers. He said things might have gone really sour if a podium finish had been on the line, because Russell would not have allowed Hamilton to go by if they were both fighting for 3rd place. If this was for the podium, it would be more intense. but the fact that it's for a slightly low position reduces the niggle that they might have. You can't tell me that George is going to just say, "Of course, Lewis, just cruise by and then I'll sit here." You don't have that train of thought all the time. It was different for Carlos Sainz in Singapore because he was leading. It's different if you're fighting with your teammate. Bird is right. Russell would have been more furious if a podium position was on the line. He would have probably pulled off of Verstappen and refused to allow his teammates. If you don't know what pulling off of Verstappen means, let me explain. Remember when Verstappen refused to let his teammate Sergio through despite the team instructing him to do so last season? Well, that's what it means to pull off of Verstappen. So, back to our discussion. After venting out his frustration on the radio, Russell later explained that he now saw things from a better perspective. For me, the goal is to secure P2 in the Constructors. On my personal side, the Drivers' Championship is totally out of the window. It's been a complete disaster of a season, so many missed chances. Lewis is in a really good position to P3. Standing here now, it's all good. And in a funny twist of events, after the race, Hamilton also came out to say that he wasn't pleased with the team instructing him to slow down to lengthen Russell's DRS. He said it was quite a risky move to ask him to stay close to Carlos Sainz when they all knew the Ferrari could get ahead of him and Russell at any minute. He said Russell was busy trying to fight him instead of thinking of doing what was best for the team by swapping with him earlier. We should have swapped around earlier, and I should have got as far ahead as possible to get the gap as big as we could to the Ferrari. Russell, was trying to fight me. He was damaging his tyres, and I think it just made it all complicated. The fact is, we are not fighting each other in the team championship. Today, we really needed to work as a team. He continued by saying the team's instruction had made no sense. When they suggested it to me, I knew that they obviously thought of it from the last race, but it made no sense. I needed to get as far clear as possible. The 7-time champion also admitted that he'd been tough on his teammates, but believed it was all part of healthy racing. He also blamed his style of racing on the collision he had with Sergio Perez at the beginning of the race. I was definitely aggressive, but I think it was good racing. Honestly, I shouldn't really have been in that position. Definitely struggled on track with the balance, but it was a good battle. A little bit aggressive, but it was what was needed to get position. It's quite normal in Formula 1 for drivers on the same team to compete with each other. Besides the collaborative result they earn for the team, they have to earn a personal position on the Drivers' Championship table. The only thing the team must ensure is that the competition remains healthy. Based on Mercedes' plans to learn from all their mistakes, there is a high chance we'd see more competition between the two drivers. And this time around, they won't be competing for P5, but rather P1. This is because they intend to incorporate all they have learned in their 2025 vehicle to make them more competitive on the grid. The last time the team saw the rivalry between two drivers was between 2014 and 2016, when Nico Rosberg and Hamilton were teammates. It was a really good time for the team. If they're able to succeed with their plans, the two current drivers would not hold back. We can't wait to see that happen. So, would it have been better if Russell had ignored the team's instruction? Kindly let us know what you think in the comment section. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next video.